Bill Cimbrelo is running against Bill Keating for the 9th Congressional District seat.
New Bedford has a rich history of people, innovation, and technology. And if we go back to 1800s, you can remember the whaling industry that started here in conjunction with Nantucket Island. You guys were the richest whaling port in the world at that point. And it took the discovery of petroleum to end the whaling industry in 1925. And through that, you also had, taking you back to 1881, you have all the textile mills all over town. That industry thrived until 1940. Then you had the tool and die business that was also doing well and took you out to 1976. And finally, in the mid-1990s, you had a booming commercial fishing industry that unfortunately in 1996, when they changed the laws on fishing, Georgia's banks got pretty well clobbered and ended that. So yes, you do a lot of fishing still from here, but not what it was. So why am I even bothering to bring this up? Well, it's because the city's history really is one that demonstrates the ability of the city to bounce back time after time. You are survivors. And if you look at how you've reinvented yourselves after all these events, I think right now you're due for your next renaissance, the next awakening, if you will. As an environmental chemist, the shorelines and the maritime economy here is extremely important to me. And these jobs are vital to our economy and the future of the region. Recently I had the occasion to listen to Bob Massey talk about shoreline economy and renewable energy, and he and I are pretty much on the same wavelength there. What he talks about is very near to my heart as well. So you've already taken some of the initial steps here in New Bedford. I think you're working with deep water wind and maybe vineyard wind. I don't know who the other players are. And you started this relationship to take you guys to the next phase, and that's fantastic. Unfortunately, as you probably all know, our illustrious governor took sides with Eversource and the Hydro-Quebec people to try and bring electricity down from Canada. Well, fortunately, New Hampshire residents put a stop to that. They did not allow that permit to go through. So really, it's put New Bedford back in the driver's seat, and that's good for you guys. And again, depending on who you decide you want to work with here. Anybody in here do any real estate sales or any realtors in the group? Well, what are the three? Yes, that's right, Ian. I saw you. What are the three most important factors to selling a property fast?
Location.
Exactly, all right. So you guys are an ideally situated location to promote and lead in offshore wind power. And to that extent, what you've got to have is the infrastructure in place and the human resources also in place. And I got to tell you, as your congressman, I'm going to make sure that you succeed in that endeavor in any way possible. But it's not only vital to the future of New Bedford that you have this renewable energy. It's also vital to the state and the nation, and also vital to the future of the planet as we go forward. But what also is essential here, if we're going to deliver on that promise, we've got to have world-class education, healthcare, transportation, affordable housing, and good nutrition. These are key elements that are the key pillars to the foundation of everything that is required to have a secure and successful foundation to everything we're trying to do. So these, it's been unfortunate, but these essential pillars have been ignored, and far too many have been denied all of this for far too long. As we move towards renewable energy to decrease pollution in this country and globally, these things are critical. And if in Congress, I will be introducing a Green New Deal to promote investments in this area. We're going to have to invest in smart grid technology, solar, and wind. These types of investments in American ingenuity will create new jobs and stimulate the economy and help the environment. And America should really be taking a lead role in this area, and we can readily afford much of this by getting rid of the subsidies that we're currently throwing at the big oil companies. These companies are making outrageous profits year after year. Instead, we can invest those monies to promote renewable energy going forward. And that's where I think we should be going. Fossil fuel does not need to be getting corporate welfare money. I think we can agree on that. If we turn around and incentivize people to use renewable energy, then we start to take this nation and the planet to where it needs to go. And to that end, I've recently signed on to support Tulsi Gabbard's what is it called? The Off Fossil Fuel Act for a better tomorrow. And that will help to take us off fossil fuels by the year 2035. And I will also, once in Congress, do anything in my power to promote any renewable energy sources that come across, and I will co-sponsor that as well. Changing gears here a little bit, one of the greatest threats we have to our economy and our future, and we talked about this a little earlier before everyone started coming in, is we have a $1.5 trillion debt that our students are carrying with them. And that debt, 10% of that is either delinquent or in default. So many of these people, to make matters worse, are having to live at home, as we talked about earlier, and people are having to, senior citizens now who have adult children, and in some cases extended families, living at home, and are now having to dig into their retirement funds to be able to carry the weight of this overwhelming debt. So what we find here is that students today are in fact facing the highest cost in any industry, and unfair and injustice is taking place with these guys as they mount this insurmountable debt. And millennials right now are in a place to be where they are, for the first time in history, going to be worse off than their parents. And that's a horrible place and a testimonial of where we've come to. So imagine for a minute if we could forgive that debt. And I believe we should. And I believe we should, if possible, renegotiate that debt to a 0% interest if we have to, or a 2% interest, something that's a little bit more manageable. Imagine the shot in the arm that our economy would get if these individuals who've been carrying around this ball and chain of debt could now go out into the marketplace and invest, possibly purchase a car or a home. But beyond that, it's not just taking care of that debt. We have to take care of the students now that are upcoming, the new graduates that are coming on board. And in order to do that, I strongly believe that we should have tuition-free college in the state of Massachusetts, and vocational, because I think some people, as we know, are not necessarily suited for a college curriculum. And we need people that have vocational skills. So one of the things that, we've had the GOP tax reduction here, and unfortunately, we don't expect to see much of a trickle-down economics taking place from that. In fact, much of that is going into them repurchasing their own shares of stock. And also what I think is going to happen is they're going to actually accelerate the process of automating their factories, et cetera. So instead of creating jobs, I think what's going to happen is we're going to see more jobs being automated out of existence. When I envision automation, I think of us all as being on a high-speed train heading down a track off a cliff, and nobody's getting off the train, and nobody's stopping the train, and automation, I'm sure, is it's inevitable, and it can't be stopped, but we can dictate how the consequences of automation affect us. And as your congressman, I would propose a $120,000 fee that corporations would have to pay for every job that gets replaced by an R2D2 or C3PO. Okay, and that would be go into a fund for retraining or education, or it could even go into a universal basic income fund, which I also support. Before I stop to take any questions, I really think it's important that everyone in here know that I am not taking any corporate donations. I'm not taking any PAC money. I'm not taking any special interest money. Our campaign is entirely 100% powered by grassroots individual donations like generous people like yourselves. And to that end, I'm asking that people please do contribute to my election to the 9th district. And this is our campaign, and I'm careful to say that it is our campaign because I can't do this alone. I can't promise to fulfill the better future we're talking about unless you guys make that happen. So metaphorically, I hope to bring you guys to Washington with me to be part of that process. And I can show you that I'm going to be working on your behalf, not on the behalf of any special interest. I appreciate your time and listening, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
This is very simple. Can you talk a little bit about your positions on foreign policy and your positions on immigration?
Sure. As far as foreign policy goes, we have currently are in 800 bases around the world, and those are just the ones we know about. I do not believe the United States should be expanding imperialism. I think in large part that, if you look at what we're doing there in terms of over an $800 billion budget, military budget, is just money that is being poorly allocated. And there are regions in the world that, yes, we have a vested interest, but I think, again, as far as this imperialism that we've seen taking place, I am not in favor of that. As far as immigration, if you're referring specifically to DACA, that was a contract that was signed with President Obama, and you could argue that it was never made into a law, and that's a problem. And unfortunately, the Republicans are trying to take advantage of that. But in all fairness, both parties have been kicking this can down the road for a long time. And I think we need to have comprehensive immigration reform, and those that are part of the DACA program and signed on to be, we can't pull the rug out from under them.
I have a few questions. One is a little further deep in the foreign policy stuff. What do you feel about us still being in Afghanistan, for one thing? And the second thing, what do you mean by tuition-free college? Because I've heard that thrown around a lot. Mm-hmm. Like my kids got tuition-free. Mm-hmm. Well, it means they didn't have to pay the $1,000 tuition, but they had $11,000 in fees. So there's a big difference between free college education with maybe having some strings attached, like you have to maintain a B average or something like that, right, versus free tuition. Free tuition does nothing to help most of the people that can't afford to go to college. Right. Okay, we need to do more than that. But so could you expand on those two things, please?
So, no, I don't believe, first of all, that we need to be in Afghanistan. I think the mission there has never been clear. Even veterans that come back from there are stupefied as to why we're there. There are many that believe that we're there to guard the poppy fields so that the sale of the poppies don't go into the wrong hands, okay? And then, but I also think potentially that we are allowing, basically, we're facilitators right now for the export of drugs from Afghanistan. So one of the things that I had thought about before, and I don't know if it's possible, but those poppy fields at this point are the lifeblood of the Afghanistan population, and we need to try and find a better way for them to sustain themselves, and then maybe we can extricate ourselves from there without opening up a bigger problem. As far as your tuition comment, you're absolutely right. I've put kids through college myself, and everybody talks about the low tuition. The fees are killers, and not only that, we've got some ridiculous book fees, right? And some of these professors, they'll go in and they'll want you to buy a $300-400 book, and you'll crack it open 3 times during the semester, and it's a scam. Today, with tablets and everything else, these books can be available at a much lower cost. They need to be. We need to stop running our educational system, our colleges, as a business, and need to start focusing on how we're going to answer the needs of our future generations and not indebt these people coming out of college. So yes, when I talk about free tuition, understand I'm talking about the big picture. I am not talking about just that, $1,000, yes.
I was wondering if you've given much thought, and if you haven't, you wouldn't be the first one, to kind of what regulations, if any, you would bring to cryptocurrencies and exchanges like Coinbase. I know that you talk a lot about millennials, and I think you're hitting on a lot of the issues that are important to them, but this is also one that I think a lot of people see as a way to kind of democratize the monetary system and work around some of the big banks. And so it's increasingly becoming an issue for Congress. And
yeah, so I'll confess to you, I know a little bit, probably just enough to be dangerous about cryptocurrency. My concern, as you've probably seen, there's been incidents of fraudulent mining going on. I think there was some corporation that was using some supercomputer to mine some crypto coin.
My question is towards the veterans. We have veterans for days that are coming back from these so-called wars totally messed up. I mean, totally screwed up. There's a lot of homeless veterans walking around here. Oh, we're going to do this for them, we're going to do that. What is being done for our veterans? And I'm a veteran myself. What is being done for our veterans? And can you propose anything to help them?
Well, as we talked earlier, Bill, one of the things that's it's a sad statistic, which maybe some of you know, there's 20 to 22 veterans a day are committing suicide.
How many? 20 to 22?
Yeah. 20 to 22 veterans per day are committing suicide. Okay? So you don't hear about that. And it's swept under the rug, and our veterans, unfortunately, are in many ways swept under the rug. So, doing things to make that stop is really important. And one of the things that kind of ties back, and this is kind of a roundabout answer, but as I said earlier, I'm for universal basic income. And one of the things that I want to do with universal basic income is to tie in mentoring. Okay, if you hand somebody $1,000 a month that they've never seen, they may not necessarily know how to administer that. They're not going to even know necessarily how to balance a checkbook and all that. Wouldn't it be wonderful to take some of these veterans that are coming back, really don't know what to do with themselves, and put them in a situation where they have some self-worth in mentoring some of these kinds of programs? And so, again, it's kind of a roundabout answer, but we have to find out more about what's happening with these veterans, what is causing them to commit suicide at that rate. We talked about housing. We talked about the fact that a lot of them don't even know what services are available to them. So there's a whole black hole of information that isn't getting to these veterans, and I would work to certainly to improve that. Yes, sir.
Yes, so two questions. One is what your policy would be on refugees from Syria or otherwise, in terms of how many people should come and what kind of restrictions you would put on or not.
Yeah.
And the second is, what do you think about single-payer healthcare as a solution to the healthcare crisis?
Okay. So on the refugees, you know, we've got the administration here is talking about building a wall with our neighbor, and on the other hand, we've got this humanitarian need, of course, that much of Eastern Europe has been dealing with the brunt of that. I think there has to be a solution that is heartfelt. We have to be able to find a solution, and the world has to be able to take this in. But more importantly, we need to stop the conflict, right? So we're not going to stop the flow of these refugees until we stop the problem. And I think that would be certainly where my focus would be. We're in a lot of places we shouldn't be, and instead of promoting peace, we've got the military-industrial complex promoting war. I mean, I feel, I don't know how you feel, but ever since North Korea came out and said that they want to talk peace and have a conversation, it's like the military-industrial complex doesn't want to hear anything about it. All right, so I think we have to look at that in that direction. I'm sorry. The other question you had was
Single-payer healthcare.
single payer. So a lot of you have my card. That's the first thing on the card. So I'm for single payer health care and promoting that. Some have said expanded Medicare for all, which is it's a little different twist. But I don't think we can continue to Band-Aid the Affordable Care Act. It's not very affordable for a lot of people. And at this point, I do feel that health care is a right. There's no reason in the world why someone who is living in a very poor condition should not have the identical health care that someone that's in the top 10, 15% of the country.
Yeah, so my question is, because I know that we have an opioid crisis right now across the nation, what are your plans on, combating that?
Yeah, I've actually attended, in Mashpee, I attended an information center on that. But the opioid crisis is a double-edged sword, as you may know, because what's happening is many chronic pain patients are being punished as a result of the crisis, and doctors are withholding adequate pain treatment to chronic pain patients. So we have to be really careful about walking that narrow strip there. The opioid crisis needs to be addressed in a way that doesn't stigmatize it. We need to have more centers. We need to. Some have suggested, and there's some evidence to support it, that the legalization of marijuana will go a long way to alleviating that crisis. I favor that. I am not a physician, obviously, but I will work with the experts, and that's what I'm going to do in every case here. I'm going to surround myself with the experts to help find solutions that are equitable as much as all concerned. There's all these solutions, there's a yin and yang on all of them. There's no, if we look at government and how government operates, it's knee-jerk, it's reactive rather than proactive. And that's what I think, I bring to the table here. I want to see our government be proactive. And let's stop problems before they even get there.
Okay, good evening. In your opening, you was talking about how devastated were the oil companies to New Bedford economy. My question is, besides presenting a bill to motivate people to invest in new energy, what you want to do to deal with the oil company that is still an obstacle for the new energy?
Well, you're very right, and that's why I said also, I'm just one person, and the only way that we're going to move Congress in a direction that really peels off the reliance on the lobbyists, on the petroleum industry, pharma, all of that, is if there's enough people like me that get elected, right? Because otherwise, I'm a little minnow swimming in a big pond. So there's about, there's hundreds of progressive candidates right now around the nation that are really echoing a lot of what I'm saying here. okay? And that's really what this is about. It's about bringing all those people together, moving Congress left, and stopping to promote these centrist policies that have brought us here and frankly have delivered Trump. We would not be here now if our Congress was working for us. And that, I think everyone in this room has to agree with that.
So what would be your ideas for changing the criminal injustice system? And secondly, I just wondered why you decided to run.
All right, so I'll take the last one first. I decided to run because of really an extensive amount of frustration with what's been going on, and the fact that, as I said, we don't have government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We haven't had that in a long, long time. And I look at my kids, and knock on wood, they're going to be okay. But I look at, we don't have kids yet, but when they have kids, what kind of world are we leaving them? I'm terrified. I'm absolutely terrified. And, so, that's definitely motivating me to be here. And, it's not an easy fight. I'm fighting an incumbent. But I also feel that I have you guys on my side who know those things that are important and want to change where we are and change the status quo. I just don't think the status quo is good enough anymore, folks. The status quo got us here. And as far as the judicial system, look, unfortunately, the justice is blind. She ain't all that blind, right? She really isn't. We've got a high percentage of people of color that are in prison. I think the first thing that the justice does is she checks your credit worthiness when you go into court. So we need to revamp that tremendously. I think a lot of the what do they call it? The court-appointed attorneys, they're all out there golfing with the DAs, and they're all buddy, and so right away, what's that? Not the public defenders? Okay, good. But the point is, we need to have some clear-cut reforms in the system right now, and I think a lot of things that end up putting somebody in jail need to be decriminalized.
So Bill, in closing, can you just tell us a little bit about your campaign as far as have you received any endorsements, and how much money do you have in your kitty? Well,
on the endorsement side, I think we've got a number that we've got waiting in limbo right now. No, Imran? I don't know. Imran, by the way, everyone, Imran is my campaign manager.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, a lot of that is still in process. To properly answer the question, is there are no current endorsements. We do have yeah, we don't have full endorsements yet. However, like I said, they are in the process, and so we've talked with a lot of groups locally, and we're just now getting started. So, we've been at this for I think we announced in January, was it?
December 28th.
December, yeah, December. It was right there before January. So, we're doing our due diligence to connect with anybody else that would like to have this discussion with Bill. And also we do have a few coffee shop meetings coming up. April 13th, we do have a Green Bean event. It will be a meet and greet. You guys can come there at around 3. We do have another coffee shop meeting at the Arpeggio. Am I saying that right? Cafe Arpeggio, yeah. We do have a meeting there, 1 o'clock on April 20th. So please come out if you guys would like to have any more sit-down discussions with us. In a more personal setting, you can ask a lot more questions. So thank you.
We good?
Okay. Well, thank you, Bill, for coming.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.